old has its advantages, and honestly, I feel like I am the perfect age. Not because my bones are crumbling into dust every time I walk up and down stairs, but because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I grew up in what I would consider to be the golden era of video games. Now look, that might be contagious for some of you, but for me, I feel like it honestly is the best. Growing up with the NES, Super NES, PS1, PS2, GameCube, Dreamcast, all the top tier consoles that even today people are going out and trying to get games for. I'm one of those people. I kid you not. Like, I'm going back and I'm trying to find all the old games from like my PS1 and PS2 just because I feel like they're better games. I feel like they've always been better games. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's just the fact that I just love them so much, but playing these old games and going back and seeing like, hey, what was gaming like again 30 years ago, 40 years ago, really is an eye-opening thing for me. Even games that I haven't gotten to actually play when I was younger that I finally get to play now from back in those days, there's a level of charm, of love, of wit, of just style to everything that you don't get nowadays. What instead you get nowadays is just either purple and yellow color schemes, green and brown color schemes, blue and orange color schemes, the same 5v5 multiplayer online service shooter with battle passes, microtransactions, and any possible way of trying to scope money out of your wallet every single time. But see, back then we didn't have that. We had full complete games in the box with the product, and they came with a manual. Believe it or not. So why am I talking about this, about the good old days of gaming? You're just being a boomer, Alex. Well, it turns out that things are in fact changing. Not only are they changing just completely worldwide because of the fact that we now have full worldwide connectivity across every country in the world, but they're changing in the sense of culture. And the thing is, the Japanese culture has always been incredibly important to me. Yes, I am a weeaboo, a sussy baka, as the kids like to say. And the thing is, growing up with anime and video games during the 80s and 90s has shaped so much of what I truly enjoy in gaming today. But because of the fact that things are changing, it turns out that there is some pushback with it. Because apparently not only have we seen cultures from other nations start to try and change their ideas and cultures to mostly fit with Western sensibilities, we've also seen their games and their content and their media change with it as well. What am I talking about? Well, you'll see now, because according to a recent news article published by VGC, Masahiro Sakurai has something to say to Japanese game developers. Earlier this month, it was announced that Sakurai had been listed as one of the recipients of the Art Encouragement Prize for New Artists, given by the Japanese government's Agency for Cultural Affairs. Rather than achieving the award for many of his video game works, Sakurai's honor is instead for his YouTube series, Masahiro Sakurai on Creating Games. Last week, Sakurai collected an award and gave an interview to Japanese entertainment news website Entax, as spotted by Automaton, in which he said he felt that Japanese studios should focus on what domestic audiences like, rather than trying to make a game that may appeal to the West. According to Sakurai, Western players buy Japanese games with the expectation that they will provide something different from Western developed games, so there's no need for Japanese studios to adapt. This right here, in my opinion, is the shot across the bow to let Japanese game developers know, hey, just be yourselves. Be weird, be quirky, be wild, be insane. Bring back the stuff that made everything so great back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, because that is why people bought those video games. And instead, we're not getting that. We're trying to get these really horribly written characters that have no sense of urgency or style or even grace to them. The fact that so many games nowadays are having multi-billion-dollar budgets and just flop harder than anything you've ever seen because people are tired, bored, and broken. Not only are they all three of those things, but there's nothing new or fresh coming down the pipeline. If you look at something like Yakuza, you can clearly see that that game is made with true love and just Japanese style and art and just culture shoved into it nonstop. And that's what makes those games so incredibly appealing and amazing. I don't buy Yakuza because I want a Western version of it. I buy Yakuza because I want Yakuza, and I've only played Yakuza 0, and that game to me is one of like the most pinnacle games of all time ever made, hands down. Playing that game was like putting 30 plus hours into a actual Japanese soap opera crime boss syndicate thing that I did not expect would happen whatsoever. With some of the best moments of all time, some of the funniest writing I've ever seen, and some of the coolest interactions ever between characters, all because it stuck to its guns. It is unapologetically Japanese, and I think that's what people yearn for. That's what they crave for nowadays. If you don't believe me, look at the reception that the Okami sequel announcement got, and that was one of the craziest things ever. A PS2 game about Okami, like coming back and having a sequel, people lost their minds. Or the fact that when Shenmue got its sequel announced, or every single time there is a classic game from a different culture having a sequel or getting a remaster, people fall in love with it again because it is unapologetically part of that culture. When I play a game like The Witcher, I want a game that has the culture from the country where it came from, like Poland. When I play a game like Path of Exile, I want the culture from that game from New Zealand. I want all those things together because the last thing I want is to be fed the same homogenized, same character looking, same color scheme, same gameplay mechanics, same everything all over again. And I think Sakurai hit it perfectly on the head. People want Japanese experiences. They want European experiences. Some even want Western experiences. But the fact that we're seeing so many other countries and places and developers want to push that aside to try and get the most amount of money out of their pocket, or because they have other cultural sensibilities that they want to reach a different audience, that impacts the actual product and the audience itself. But there's more to what Sakurai had to say. He continues by saying, it's not necessarily my own idea, but the trend in the games industry is that Japanese people should go for what Japanese people like. Sakurai explained via AI translation. A while ago, there was certainly a culture of making Americanized products because various works were popular in the US. However, I feel that Japanese game lovers overseas are not looking for such things, but for something unique and interesting from Japan. In other words, I think the ideal is to make the games the way that you like them, and the people who can accept them will enjoy them. That last line is so incredibly important to me. Unfortunately, now today, there are too many people in the gaming industry. I know, I've said it before. It is too big of an industry to fail on its own, and it is far too big to take any major risks. And companies today don't understand how to actually minimize risk and create lower budget products to then go ahead and create audiences for those products. We see the same thing happen every time. When you look at a massive game that comes out nowadays that has multiple sequels, it's not because the first couple of games were huge, massive successes. It's because they were budgeted correctly, provided a niche audience, grew that audience consistently, and then were able to go ahead and steamroll the competition through and through. But just like Sakurai says, it has to be games that they want to make. And we're seeing this happen, though, over and over again, where companies are going around and trying to put a more Western spin on things. Here's what Sega had to say back in 2019, where Sega had a commitment to player localization, bringing more Western players to popular Japanese franchises. And honestly, that bit them in the rear end, because later on, back in 2024, we then see those same localizers admitting to proactively censoring games for Western audiences, removing the things that make the game unequivocally Japanese or part of that culture to try and make it more sensible for the audience that's going into play. And we've seen it countless times over and over again, where people will say, I don't want your idea of what the person should say. I want exactly what is actually being said by that player character in the game from the original creator, going around changing the costumes of people, changing the ideas of what they're saying, using modern slang in current video game culture that's going to be expired in the next couple of years, because no one's going to know what sheesh is going to mean in a couple of years anyways. Hell, even now, it's totally out of line. To even put something like that in a video game is really just ridiculous. And seeing that censorship happen directly is also a major problem too, because it ruins the original intent and idea of what the artwork should be for those those games moving forward for audiences. Even if a different audience doesn't like that game, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be made or that you need to change everything to forsake that art form for that. It got so bad with specifically Sega and Yakuza that the Like a Dragon series producer had to make comments on the franchise localization, saying that the original Japanese content was not changed, because now if you wanted to play that with the original content being there, you had to play it in Japanese, which honestly a lot of people prefer subbed over dubbed. I'm that kind of guy. I prefer subs over dubs every single time. Sorry, just how it is. But the thing is, not everybody wants to play it that way, and we see it happen over and over where there's backlash all over the place, simply because they want to try and go ahead and either have some sensibility changes for a different audience, or those same publishers and developers are trying to gain a bigger audience and mind share of different kinds of money to be brought in because the budget is too high for that game specifically. Here's something that is incredibly important to what Sakurai also said in the article. Take a look. In an interview earlier this year, Sakurai noted that while it's important for developers to make the games they want to make, they should also sometimes consider that it may be in the best interest of the industry to make something that's needed, even if it doesn't directly appeal to them. Sakurai explained that the people who make toys for children are adults who obviously aren't the toys demographic, but are still specialists in that field. He then cited his first game, Kirby's Dream Land, as an example of this, explaining that while it wasn't the type of game that appealed to him directly as an experienced player, he felt it was important to make a game for younger players. That right there is just incredibly mind-numbingly insane to think about, because so many times nowadays what we're seeing is game developers try to make games for themselves and they try to put themselves into it. We've seen so many times where we're like, oh wait, is that a self-insert? That looks like a self-insert. Why would you do a self-insert? And then you call it out and they're like, no, it's not a self-insert. And you can kind of clearly tell it's a self-insert because it's pretty apparent. We see so many games where everyone is trying to either be pandered to, catered to, trying to reach a specific demographic, trying to do the whole modern audience thing, which every time we see it, everybody just rolls their eyes because they think, oh, I'm going to get preached to instead of actually be able to play the video game. And I think that's the problem. People look at it instead of like, let me make the best game possible. Instead, they want to say, I want to make a game that's for me. When in reality, no one buys a game for you. They buy a game because it's good and it's for them. You know what that reminds me of? It's kind of like that scene from Joe Dirt when he goes around and he sees the Indian tracker selling snakes and sparklers and fireworks. And he's like, you don't got no whistling bung holes. You don't got no skinny whips. You don't got no snake bites. You don't got any of that. He's like, no. He's like, why not? He's like, because I don't like snakes and sparklers. And Joe Dirt clearly says, it's not about what you like. It's about what the consumer likes. And that scene to me sticks out more and more every day as I get older. It's not about what the developer wants. I don't care what they want. It's about what I want as the consumer. I'm the one handing over my money to them to give me the product that I feel I should have. That's the whole process of this. When people go around, they start injecting their own political beliefs, or they start adding their own ways of how they think things should be, or they want to make a game that they think is good for them. It then alienates the people that would have bought their game in the first place. And then 100% of zero is zero, because if only one person buys the game, the person who made it, that's the only sale they're going to get. Now, moving all that aside, we can also look at it from a pure gameplay perspective, because Final Fantasy XVI, in my opinion, would have had a much better reception if it was turn-based. And I know it's going to piss a lot of people off, but turn-based combat should be a staple in so many role-playing games, unless it's an action role-playing game like PoE or Diablo or Last Epoch or etc. But when Final Fantasy XVI ditched turn-based combat to appeal to younger generations, Yoshi P, honestly, in my opinion, made a grave mistake. He says, and I quote, "I thought about the expected sales of Final Fantasy XVI and the impact that we have to deliver. But then when you look at the reception of games like Metaphor ReFantazio, the Persona series, games that stick to their guns, games that are like, you know what? Who cares about trying to deliver or the sales? We just want to make a good game for people that are going to enjoy us as a culture, as a brand, as just the type of game that we're going to make. And everything else be damned, because there are going to be people there that want to play that kind of game. It's adjusting those expectations. Square Enix is notorious for having those really bad ideas and trying to push a huge budget onto games that cannot reach those budgets consistently. And we saw that happen here. The entire gameplay of FF16 could have been completely different. Hell, if you look at Expedition 33, that's, in my opinion, what Final Fantasy 16 should have been. Look at that kind of turn-based combat. It screams Final Fantasy. It screams Persona. It looks cool as shit. You could have combined those things together and make it stylized like Devil May Cry with turn-based combat. But no, instead we're now using other sensibilities to wash things away and buff away the edges and make things smooth so that way everybody gets to enjoy them. A game for everyone is a game for no one, apparently, because no one's going to want to buy a boring game that has no style or culture or grace to it. And that's what we're seeing happen over and over again. I want to go back to the days where games had style, where they had substance, where somebody cool was at the helm. That's why I love Kojima games so much, because you look at a game and you go, oh, that's a Kojima game if I ever fucking saw one. It may not be for everybody, but damn it, it's a damn Kojima game. Or you look at a Capcom game and you say the same exact thing, or a Sega game and you say the exact same thing. I want companies and developers from different cultures to represent their cultures and to show up and say, hey, here's what we bring to the table. And it's honestly awesome, because then I get to experience their culture directly from their perspective and their point of view through their art. And it means so much more to me as a player and enjoyer of video games to see it from that perspective and to gain that understanding, even if it's uncomfortable for me or it pushes certain boundaries that I'm not used to, or it's just different altogether. That's what art should be. That's why this medium is so great. It's a form of art that can be played by everyone and have different perspectives being put into it where people can enjoy it. But the more that we sit here and let other talking heads walk around and try to say, no, you can't do that, or you can't do this because of my personal sensibilities, or people who make games want to make games for themselves and not the actual audience they're trying to actually sell games to, or even then the budgets get so big that they have to go ahead and water everything down and smooth away all the rough edges to not either make anybody upset or alienate people because of gameplay. It really ruins everything, because then you start losing what makes games so fantastic, and it's their ability to be independent pieces of art that each one has its own style and creativity, whether good or bad, that you get to play and enjoy and understand from that perspective. And I feel like that's what's been missing in gaming so often. I feel like that's why every time we see a game award show or a game announcement, we all just roll our eyes and go, ugh, boring again. Another pile of slop again. Another boring third-person cover-based action adventure game with stealth elements again. That's all we get now. We don't get the stuff we used to get like back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Maybe it's just me getting old. Or maybe it's just me finally realizing that gaming really was better back then. And hopefully today, things can go back to the way they used to be. But who knows? But you know what? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Do you feel the way I feel, or do you think any differently? I'd love to find out and ask why. If you guys want to go ahead and see more of this kind of content, more of my hot takes, more PC port reviews, gaming news, Steam Deck videos, fanboy content, and live streams every Saturday night, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 79,000 subs. And I just want to say thank you guys so very much for that. If you want Discord access or most during live streams, become a YouTube member. It's as low as $1. If you don't want to spend the buck, don't sweat it. Come on down Saturday night, 8:45 p.m. Eastern. Trust me, the streams are insane. Chat rules the entire thing, and you're going to have a fantastic time laughing as everybody gets to make fun of me for about 4.5 to 5 hours. You won't be disappointed. With all that being said, though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you next time. Peace!